Most beginner aquarium plants are sold with a promise that sounds almost too good to be true. Low light, low maintenance, slow growing, easy for beginners. And when people hear that description, one plant name appears again and again: Anubias. But here is the part most beginners do not hear. Anubias is not just one plant. It is a whole group of plants that can behave very differently once they are actually inside your aquarium. Some stay tiny and neat. Some turn into large background plants. Some have broad leaves that make perfect cover for fish and shrimp. Some look beautiful in a shot pot, then melt back for months after you bring them home. And a few of them are so tough that they seem almost impossible to kill, as long as you avoid one simple mistake. That is why in this video, I want to make Anubias easier to understand before you spend money on the wrong plant. We are going to look at the types of Anubias that are most useful in real planted aquariums, where each one fits best, which ones are safer for beginners, which ones I would be careful with, and which small Anubias alternative may actually give you more color and texture than Anubias itself. And stay until the final part, because there is one timing mistake that may explain why so many people lose Anubias nana and Anubias petite right after buying them. It is not always bad lighting. It is not always bad fertilizer. Sometimes the plant is telling you something about the maturity of the tank. Before we compare the individual types, we need to clear up the most important Anubias rule. Do not bury the rhizome. The rhizome is the thick horizontal stem that the leaves and roots grow from. If you push that thick stem under the substrate, it can rot. The roots can go into the substrate if they naturally reach down, but the rhizome itself should stay exposed to water flow. The easiest way to use Anubias is to attach it to driftwood, rock, or another piece of hardscape. You can tie it with thread, wedge it gently into a crack, use a small amount of aquarium-safe glue, or even hold it in place with a ceramic ring until the roots grab on. Once it attaches, it usually becomes one of the easiest plants in the tank. Anubias also grows slowly. That slow growth is part of its charm, but it is also one reason the leaves can collect algae if the plant is placed under harsh light. In nature-based, low-tech aquariums, Anubias usually looks best in gentle shade, under floating plants, beside taller stems, or under the shadow of wood and stone. It does not need powerful light to look good. In many tanks, too much light is actually what makes it look worse. Another thing beginners should know is that Anubias is not a heavy root-feeding plant in the same way as a sword plant or a crypt. It pulls nutrients from the water column and from the biofilm around its roots and rhizome. This is why it works so well in natural aquariums with fish waste, shrimp activity, leaf litter, old wood, and a living layer of microorganisms. You do not have to chase complicated dosing routines just to keep Anubias alive. But choosing the right type matters. A huge Anubias in a tiny tank can look awkward. A tiny Anubias in a large tank can disappear. A delicate variety in an immature tank can melt before it ever has a chance to settle. So let us begin with one of the biggest and hardiest types in the hobby. Anubias barteri is the classic large Anubias that many people imagine when they think of the plant. It has broad green leaves, strong stems, and a very sturdy look. In the right conditions, it can become a tall, impressive background or mid-ground plant. This is not the type I would choose for a tiny nano aquarium, unless you are willing to trim it and accept that it may eventually dominate the scape. The strength of Anubias barteri is toughness. It is one of the more forgiving Anubias types, and that makes it a good choice for beginners who have enough space. It handles low light well, it can live in many different water conditions, and it is not usually the first plant to melt when the tank has a little instability. If you are building a simple community tank and you want a plant that can sit on wood, offer cover, and keep looking green for a long time, this is a dependable option. The leaves are large enough to create real shelter. Small fish can rest underneath them. Shrimp can graze on the surface. Snails will clean the biofilm. In a natural aquarium, broad Anubias leaves become little grazing platforms, not just decoration. That is one reason this plant works so well in peaceful community tanks. The downside is simple. It can become too large for the wrong layout. If the tank is small, the plant may not look like a delicate accent. It may look like a houseplant shoved underwater. That is not the plant being bad. That is just a mismatch between plant size and aquarium size. If you have a larger, low-tech tank, Anubias barteri can be a strong background anchor. If you have a smaller tank, there are better choices coming later. Next is Anubias coffeefolia, one of the most visually interesting Anubias types because of its leaf texture. The leaves are not just smooth green ovals. They have a ribbed, wrinkled, slightly sculpted look that catches light in a different way. If your aquarium has many plants with simple leaf shapes, coffeefolia adds instant contrast. This is the kind of plant that makes a scape feel more mature. It does not scream for attention with bright red color. It creates interest through texture. When placed near smooth stones, twisted driftwood, or fine-leaved plants, those textured leaves stand out even more. Coffeefolia can work in the midground or background, depending on the tank. It can stay somewhat compact in some aquariums, but it can also grow taller in others. That unpredictability is worth remembering. If you are designing a very precise aquascape where every plant must stay a certain height, coffeefolia may not be the most predictable choice. But if you like a natural planted tank that develops slowly and organically, that variation can actually make it more interesting. The main drawback is price and availability. Coffeefolia is often a little more expensive than the most common Anubias types. The difference is not always huge, but if you are planting many pieces of hardscape, it can add up. For a beginner, buying just one plant as a feature, I think it is worth considering. For someone trying to fill an entire tank on a budget, it may be better to start with cheaper varieties first. In low light, coffeefolia usually does well. Like most Anubias, it does not need strong lighting to survive. What it needs most is patience, stable water, and a place where the rhizome can breathe. If you want one Anubias that looks different from the normal beginner plant, coffeefolia is one of the easiest ways to get that effect. Now let us talk about Anubias caladiifolia. This is an excellent all-rounder when you can find it. It usually has a moderate size, not tiny and not massive, which makes it useful in many aquariums. It can fit into the midground of a larger tank or become a strong feature plant in a smaller one. The big advantage of caladiifolia is leaf size compared with overall plant size. The plant does not need to become enormous before it starts giving fish and shrimp useful cover. The leaves can feel broad and generous without the whole plant taking over the aquascape. For community tanks, this is a very practical trait. A lot of plant listings describe the leaves as heart-shaped or arrow-shaped. In real tanks, the exact leaf shape can vary. Sometimes they look more oval, sometimes they look more elongated. That does not make the plant worse, but it does mean you should not buy it expecting every leaf to match a perfect catalog photo. Aquarium plants are living things, and their growth changes depending on conditions, age, and even the specific nursery form. For beginners, caladiifolia can be a very good choice. It gives that broadleaf Anubias look without becoming as large as the biggest types. It can create shade, cover, and structure. It is also useful when you want the aquarium to look full without relying only on fast-growing stem plants. The challenge is finding it. Depending on your local stores and online suppliers, caladiifolia may be available 1 month and gone the next. If you see a healthy portion at a good price, it may be worth grabbing. But if you cannot find it, do not worry. There are other types that can fill a similar role. One of those is Anubias coinleaf. Coinleaf is loved for exactly the reason the name suggests. The leaves are round, simple, and very noticeable. In a tank full of narrow leaves, feathery moss, and long stems, coinleaf adds a bold shape. It is a small design detail, but it can change the whole feeling of a scape. This is one of the best Anubias types for people who care about leaf contrast. You can place it beside Java fern, crypts, moss, or fine stem plants, and the rounded leaves will immediately read as something different. It gives the aquascape more variety without needing bright colors or difficult care. Coinleaf is usually a slow grower. That is good if you want the layout to stay stable. It is less useful if you want a plant to quickly fill empty space. Like most Anubias, it rewards patience. You attach it to hardscape, let it settle, and allow it to become more established over time. In smaller tanks, coinleaf can work as a mid-ground or feature plant. In larger tanks, it can be grouped around the base of wood or stone for a natural, layered look. The leaves are big enough to offer small fish some cover, and shrimp will happily graze across them. There are also smaller coinleaf forms, sold under names like nano coin or mini coin. The differences can be confusing, because shops do not always label them consistently. Sometimes the regular and smaller forms look very similar when young. If you are shopping online, pay attention to the actual photo and the seller description, not just the name. If you need a very tiny plant for a small foreground detail, then the mini form may be worth the extra cost. If you just want a hardy, rounded Anubias, the regular coinleaf is usually enough. For beginner friendliness, coinleaf is one of the safer choices. It is hardy, attractive, and not too demanding. It is also not as common-looking as standard Anubias nana, which makes it feel a bit more special without becoming difficult. Next is Anubias glabra, a plant with a very different leaf shape. Instead of broad, round leaves, glabra tends to have longer, narrower leaves. That makes it extremely useful when you want the hardiness of Anubias, but do not want every plant in the tank to have the same broad leaf silhouette. Glabra can be a little confusing because of naming. In the hobby, it has often been sold under different names, and some shops may still use older labels. The important thing for most aquarists is not to become lost in the naming debate, but to recognize the plant form. If you see a narrow-leaved Anubias sold as glabra, or under a closely related trade name, it is usually being used in the same way in aquascapes. The narrow leaves make glabra look more elegant and vertical. It can work nicely around wood branches, along the side of rock, or behind lower Anubias varieties. It gives movement without the maintenance of a fast-growing stem plant. In low-tech tanks, that is valuable. This plant can become tall enough for the midground or background, but it still grows slowly enough that you can control it with trimming. If a leaf becomes too large or too algae-covered, you can remove it and let the rhizome produce new growth. The key is to avoid cutting the whole plant back too aggressively at once. Anubias stores energy slowly, so heavy trimming can set it back. In my view, glabra is underrated. It is not as instantly cute as petite and not as classic as nana, but it adds a shape that many planted tanks need. It can make a low-tech aquarium look more layered and less repetitive. If you already have round-leaf Anubias and want something different, glabra is one of the best next choices. The one caution is light. In gentle, low light, glabra is usually dependable. Under stronger lighting, it can become more hit or miss, especially if algae starts coating the older leaves. If your tank has stronger lights, place glabra in partial shade, under taller plants, or behind hardscape. Now we come to Anubias nana, probably one of the most common Anubias types in the aquarium hobby. Nana became popular because it is small enough to fit almost anywhere. In a large aquarium, it can be used as a detail plant on wood or rock. In a small aquarium, it can become a main feature plant. The size makes nana extremely flexible. It does not overwhelm the scape as quickly as large Anubias. It can sit near the front of the tank, along a piece of driftwood, or tucked between stones. It also has that familiar broad-leaf look that many beginners want. For shrimp tanks, nana is useful because the leaves collect biofilm. Shrimp graze on the surface, baby shrimp can hide around the base, and the plant gives a stable structure that does not need constant trimming. For Betta tanks, nana can also be useful because the leaves may become resting spots if they are positioned near the right level. But nana has one downside that beginners should understand. It can melt after being moved into a new tank. Sometimes the leaves soften, yellow, or break down. This does not always mean the plant is dead. In many cases, the rhizome survives and new leaves appear later. But the waiting period can be frustrating. This is why I do not always call nana the easiest Anubias, even though it is one of the most common. It is easy once settled, but the transition can be rough. Some keepers have no problems with it at all. Others see melt again and again. The difference may come from plant source, tank maturity, water conditions, or how the plant was grown before sale. If you buy nano, inspect the rhizome. It should feel firm, not mushy. Avoid plants with a soft brown rhizome or a rotten smell. A few damaged leaves are not a disaster, but a damaged rhizome is much more serious. Once you place it in the tank, do not keep moving it every few days. Give it time to attach and adjust. Next is Anubias petite, one of the smallest and cutest Anubias types. Petite is often used for detail work. It can sit on the front of a rock, the tip of a branch, or the foreground edge of a hardscape layout. In nano aquariums, it can create a sense of scale that larger plants cannot. When petite is healthy, it looks amazing. The leaves are compact, neat, and almost miniature. It can make a small tank look carefully designed. It is also very useful in aquascapes where you want the hardscape to remain visible instead of being swallowed by plant growth. But petite is also one of the most frustrating Anubias types for many aquarists. It melts more often than people expect, and unlike nano, which often regrows after melting, petite does not always recover. Some plants bounce back, others slowly disappear. This is where many beginners get confused. They buy petite because it looks perfect for a small tank, but they put it into a fresh setup that is still unstable. The plant looks fine for a while, then the leaves begin to fail. The keeper blames the light, the fertilizer, the water change schedule, or the shop. Sometimes those things matter. But there is another possibility that becomes very important with delicate small Anubias. Here is the midpoint lesson that can save you money. Smaller does not always mean easier. A tiny plant can be more sensitive than a larger one because it has less stored energy. A big, hardy Anubias can lose a few leaves and still keep going. A tiny petite may not have as much energy to recover. That is why I would not use petite as the first plant in a brand new aquarium unless the tank is already cycled and stable. Petite is best used like a detail plant, not like a problem solver. If your tank is mature, your hardscape is ready, and you want a clean foreground accent, it can be beautiful. If your tank is brand new and you need a tough plant to survive beginner mistakes, I would start with coin leaf, glabra, caladiifolia, or a larger barteri type instead. Now let us step slightly outside Anubias and talk about Bucephalandra. Technically, Bucephalandra is not Anubias, but in actual aquarium use, it often fills a similar role. It is a rhizome plant. It attaches to hardscape. It grows slowly. It works well in low-tech aquariums, and it is especially useful as an alternative to the smaller Anubias types. The main reason to consider Bucephalandra is variety. Anubias is usually green. The leaf shape and size can change, but the color range is limited. Bucephalandra can offer darker greens, bluish tones, reddish tones, metallic hints, and different leaf textures depending on the type. If you want a low-tech hardscape plant with more visual variety, Bucephalandra is hard to ignore. It can be used on driftwood, lava rock, dragonstone, or small hardscape details. It is excellent in shrimp tanks because the leaves and roots collect biofilm. It also fits the natural aquarium style very well because it looks like a small plant that belongs on wet stones and river edges. In many tanks, Bucephalandra is hardy once settled, but it has a reputation for melting during transition, especially after shipping or sudden changes. So the safest way to try it is to buy one healthy portion first, place it in a stable tank, and watch how it responds. If it does well in your water, then you can add more types later. For aquascaping, Bucephalandra can be more exciting than Anubias petite because it offers more color and leaf variation. If your tank already has several green Anubias plants, a patch of Bucephalandra can add depth without changing your whole maintenance style. Now that we have gone through the main options, let us rank them in a practical way for real aquarium keeping. For a larger beginner tank, Anubias barteri is one of the safest choices. It is hardy, broad-leaved, and forgiving. It is not the best for a tiny tank, but in the right aquarium, it is one of the easiest plants to recommend. For a versatile planted tank, where you want broad leaves without huge size, caladiifolia is excellent. It gives useful cover, it looks full, and it fits many layouts. The only real issue is finding it. For visual texture, coffeefolia is one of the most interesting. The ribbed leaves make it stand out, and it gives a planted tank a more mature look. It may cost a little more, and its final size can be less predictable, but it is a beautiful feature plant. For a hardy plant with a unique round leaf, coin leaf is one of my favorite choices. It is beginner-friendly, attractive, and useful in many tank sizes. If you want something that looks different from standard nano but still stays easy, coin leaf is a very strong option. For narrow leaf contrast, glabra is excellent. It is not the flashiest plant at first glance, but it solves a real design problem. It adds a different shape while keeping the slow, hardy nature that makes Anubias useful. For flexibility and availability, nano is still important. It is common for a reason. It fits many tanks, works well on hardscape, and can become a reliable plant once established. But I would not ignore its tendency to melt in some setups. For tiny detail work, petite is beautiful but more risky. It is not a bad plant. It is just not the beginner-proof plant that many people assume it is. Use it in stable tanks, not as your first test plant in a fresh aquarium. And for a small hardscape plant with more color, Bucephalandra may be the best alternative. It is not Anubias, but it belongs in the same conversation because it can do many of the same jobs while adding more variety. Here are a few simple layout ideas that make these plants easier to use. In a peaceful community aquarium, use larger Anubias behind or beside the main piece of wood. Let the leaves create shaded pockets where small fish can pause. Then, use coin leaf or nano closer to the front of the hardscape to create a lower layer. This gives the tank depth without requiring a difficult plant carpet. In a shrimp tank, focus on leaf surface and biofilm. Coin leaf, nano, caladiifolia, and small Bucephalandra patches are especially useful because shrimp can constantly graze on them. You do not need to make the tank look perfectly clean. A natural shrimp tank should have a living surface. The goal is not sterile glass and plastic. The goal is stable growth, gentle algae control, and a healthy grazing area. In a Betta tank, avoid making the center of the tank too crowded, but use Anubias leaves around resting zones. A broad leaf near a quiet corner can become a place where the fish pauses between swimming. Larger leaves can also break the line of sight, which can help the tank feel calmer. In a long, low tank, do not place every Anubias in a straight row. That makes the layout look artificial. Instead, group them around hardscape points. Put one larger plant near the main wood, a smaller plant at the base, and a tiny detail plant on a nearby stone. This creates a natural cluster, like plants colonizing the same shaded surface. In a very small aquarium, resist the urge to buy too many different types at once. One healthy coin leaf, one small nano, or one Bucephalandra patch may look better than a crowded collection of tiny rhizomes. Small tanks become messy very quickly when every inch is filled with a different plant. Let the hardscape breathe. When you shop for Anubias, look beyond the leaves. Healthy leaves are nice, but the rhizome tells the real story. A firm green or brownish rhizome is usually a good sign. A soft, collapsing, foul-smelling rhizome is a warning sign. If the rhizome is already rotting, the plant may keep declining even after you place it correctly. Also remember that many Anubias are grown above water before sale. When those leaves move underwater, some adjustment is normal. The plant may pause. Older leaves may look tired. New submerged leaves may come slowly. This is not a plant that transforms overnight. Give it time before deciding it has failed. Fertilizer can help, but it should not be used as a panic button. If the plant is melting because the rhizome is buried, fertilizer will not fix the problem. If the plant is melting because the tank is unstable, fertilizer may not fix the problem. Start with the basics first. Expose the rhizome. Reduce harsh light. Improve gentle flow. Keep the tank stable. Then, consider light feeding through the water column if the plant is clearly lacking nutrients over time. One of the best signs that Anubias is happy is not fast growth, it is steady growth. A new leaf every so often, a firm rhizome, clean roots gripping wood, and leaves that stay strong for a long time are all good signs. Do not judge it like a stem plant. Anubias is not trying to race to the surface, it is trying to persist. Now let us talk about the mistake I mentioned at the beginning. Many people think Anubias melt is only caused by burying the rhizome, too much light, not enough fertilizer, or poor plant quality. Those can all matter. But with smaller types like nano, and especially petite, one of the biggest hidden problems may be adding them too early, when the aquarium is still cycling or still chemically unstable. During the early life of a tank, ammonia and other nitrogen compounds can rise and fall. Fish keepers often focus on whether fish can survive those spikes, but plants respond too. Many fast-growing plants can use nitrogen compounds quickly and may even help stabilize the system. But slow-growing rhizome plants do not always react the same way. A delicate Anubias petite sitting in a brand new tank may not enjoy that instability at all. This does not mean Anubias can never be used in a new tank. Larger and hardier types often tolerate a lot, but if you have repeatedly lost nano or petite during new setups, try this instead. Cycle the aquarium first. Let the filter or natural biological system mature. Let the hardscape grow a little biofilm. Let the water become stable. Then add the more delicate Anubias types. This one change can make the plant look much easier. It is not magic, it is just better timing. Another useful habit is to quarantine or observe new Anubias before placing it into the final display. Check the rhizome, remove mushy leaves, and give the plant a chance to adjust. If you are adding it to a shrimp tank, also be careful with plants from unknown sources, because some nursery treatments can be dangerous to shrimp. Rinse well, buy from trusted aquarium suppliers, and avoid rushing delicate livestock into contact with freshly treated plants. Placement matters too. Do not put slow-growing Anubias directly under the strongest part of the light if you do not have a plan for algae control. In low-tech aquariums, Anubias often looks best where the light is gentle and indirect. It can be shaded by floating plants, tall stems, wood, or even larger leaves. This reduces algae pressure while still giving the plant enough light to grow slowly. Water flow also helps. The rhizome should not sit in a dead zone packed with debris. Gentle flow around the plant keeps the rhizome healthier and helps prevent waste from building up. You do not need blasting current. You just want the plant to breathe. When trimming Anubias, remove old, damaged leaves close to the stem, but do not strip the whole plant bare unless the leaves are truly failing. A slow-growing plant needs its leaves to collect energy. If a leaf has a little algae but is still healthy, you can leave it until the plant has enough new growth to replace it. You can also divide Anubias by cutting the rhizome, but only do this when the plant is healthy and each piece has enough leaves and roots to support itself. Cutting a weak plant into tiny pieces can make it harder for every piece to recover. Patience creates stronger divisions. So which Anubias should you buy first? If you have a larger aquarium and want the safest beginner plant, choose Anubias barteri. If you want a reliable plant that fits many tanks and has a beautiful rounded leaf, choose coin leaf. If you want broad leaves without a huge plant, look for caladiifolia. If you want texture, choose coffeefolia. If you want narrow leaf contrast, choose glabra. If you want the common small classic, choose nano, but expect possible melt during adjustment. If you want a tiny foreground detail, choose petite only when the tank is stable. And if you already have several Anubias plants and want something that still feels low maintenance but looks more colorful, try Bucephalandra. The real secret is that Anubias is easy only when you respect what kind of plant it is. It is slow. It is patient. It prefers stability over constant changes. It wants its rhizome exposed. It looks better in gentle light than under harsh brightness. It does not need you to keep disturbing it. Attach it, place it well, Give it time, and let the aquarium mature around it. In a natural planted tank, that slow pace can be a strength. Anubias does not need weekly trimming. It does not collapse the moment carbon dioxide injection is missing. It does not demand perfect aquascaping skill. It simply becomes part of the hardscape, slowly turning wood and stone into living structure. That is why I still think Anubias deserves its beginner-friendly reputation, but only with the right expectations. It is not one plant. It is a toolbox. Some types are big anchors. Some are mid-ground cover. Some are tiny details. Some are better for mature tanks. Some are better for beginners who need something tough right away. Choose the type that matches your tank, not just the name on the pot. And if you do that, Anubias can become one of the most useful plants you will ever keep. If this helped you choose the right Anubias, take a look at your own aquarium before buying the next plant. Ask one simple question. Do you need height, cover, texture, contrast, or tiny detail? Once you know that answer, the best Anubias becomes much easier to choose.